At number 5, the Lalaurie House, New Orleans. And what a structure to start our list off with, possibly one of the most notoriously haunted houses in the whole of New Orleans because, well, there's a lot of them. It is a chilling obelisk that stands in the wake of the brutal excess of slavery and the horrifying deeds that it harboured for more than 150 years. The story begins in 1832 when Dr. Louis Lalaurie and his wife Delphine moved into the Creole mansion of the French Quarter at 1140 Royal Street. It was a beautiful home filled with trinkets and portraits from all around the world, and it became renowned for the ruckus social affairs that took place there. As the legend goes, Delphine Lalaurie knew how to throw a party. She was considered one of the most intelligent and beautiful women in the whole of New Orleans, but this was only the side that she allowed others to see, because deep down beneath the surface was a cruel, cold-blooded and evil soul. She is alleged to have killed and tortured hundreds of slaves, only discovered after a terrible fire that swept through the house and revealed the horrors that she'd hidden in the attic. Truly a terrifying tale and reason for anyone to avoid the horrors of the Lalaurie house. Next up at number 4, Franklin Castle, Ohio. Built between 1881 and 1883 by the famed architectural firm Cuddle and Richardson. Heard of them? Yeah, me neither. The Victorian stone house, located at 4308 Franklin Boulevard of Cleveland, Ohio, was built for the prosperous German family headed by patriarch Hannes Tiedemann. It is mostly unassuming for the most part, but the house was stricken with a series of tragedies that gave it the notorious reputation it has today. In 1891, Tiedemann's 15-year-old daughter Emma had succumbed to diabetes and tragically died. Not long afterwards, his elderly mother passed away. During the next 3 years, the family would bury 3 more of their children, which gave rise to the tale that there was something more to the deaths than met the eye. Whatever the truth to it, the tales of Franklin Castle are the stuff of horror legend, and throughout the 19th century, whispers of a gruesome axe murder, a mass Nazi shooting in the basement, and the discovery of baby bones in the property's garden only added to the twisted tale. Today, a private property sign stands outside the home as it falls decrepitly into decay.
Number 3 on this list is the Priestley House. The Priestley House is one of our classic old homes that's just literally haunted. It was built all the way back in 1852 in Canton, Mississippi. It is a beautiful home on the outside and in, but it's host to a lot of paranormal characters. Our main characters at this home are the original owners of the place, Dr. James Priestley and his wife Susan Priestley. Both of them died in this home many years ago under mysterious circumstances. Nowadays, the new tenants of this house, whoever they may be, all report things falling and objects flying all over the place. They've even seen the ghosts of 2 people who claim to be Dr. James and Susan. They're always causing havoc and scaring those who live here. It seems as if they believe they are the rightful owners of this house and nobody should be allowed to stay in it even though they've passed on. It hasn't stopped people from trying to live here up until this point, but pretty much everybody who goes here eventually leaves soon after based on how haunted it is. I would recommend setting up camp in another home if I was you. Number 2 on this list is the Pink Palace. Well, I'll be honest folks, I think the name here, the Pink Palace, is enough to turn me off from buying the place, but that's just me. Rocket Homes says, purchase this light pink home and you might also get your very own guardian. That's because the ghost that haunts this home is protective of the property and those who live there. Believed to be a previous owner named Avery, the spirit has appeared to residents just before bad things happen in the home, like a fire in the kitchen or a cinder block crashing through a window. Both times, Avery possibly saved their lives. Along with this added benefit, the home itself boasts 6 bedrooms, original woodwork, stained glass windows, and an in-ground pool. And you won't have to worry about waterproofing the basement. That was done this year. So in this rare case, the haunting is actually a bit of a benefit. This haunting may actually save your life if you purchase this house and something inexplicably goes wrong. However, you also need to live in a place called the Pink Palace. And if you guys hadn't guessed, it's pretty freaking pink on the outside. In fact, I don't think it could get more pink if it even tried. So I guess we kind of have a mixed bag on this one. And finally, number 1 on this list is One Lavetta Place. Believe it or not, this home is literally legally haunted. Rocket Homes says, located on a tree-lined dead-end street in Nyack, New York, One Lavetta Place is as famous as its past celebrity owners, including director Adam Brooks, singer Ingrid Michaelson, and rapper Matisyahu. The home gained notoriety when the New York Supreme Court declared it legally haunted in 1991. The ruling was the result of Stambovsky vs. Ackley case, in which homebuyer Jeffrey Stambovsky sued seller Helen Ackley over not disclosing the haunting prior to the sale and fought to rescind his offer. The court ruled in Stambovsky's favor and the home made history. While there's not been any reported hauntings in recent years, perhaps you'll experience the paranormal activity the Ackleys publicly claimed to have had decades ago. Before selling the home, Helen and her family had reported multiple incidents of poltergeists from the Revolutionary War shaking the beds, slamming doors, and leaving gifts. That's actually insane, guys. A house gets declared haunted in the court of law. Like, that seems like something from a movie. Now, this is going to be an expensive purchase. Considering it is the first home ever to be legally classified as haunted, a lot of people want to own it, meaning that the price is pretty high. But if you had the money, then you could in fact purchase it. Why you'd want to have a bunch of Revolutionary War ghosts slamming doors and bothering you all the time is beyond me, but I guess to each their own, right?
Kicking off at number 5, the Castle of Good Hope, Cape Town, South Africa. Built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, the Castle of Good Hope is the country's oldest colonial building that was originally constructed as a replenishment station for ships passing through the unforgiving and treacherous waters of the Cape of Good Hope, a key strategic point throughout the colonial era. Yeah, although technically not a house as we know it, but the castle was home to hundreds of people throughout its time of use, and as we know, more people equals more ghosts. The first paranormal occurrence was reported in 1915 alongside one of the castle's ramparts, who was regularly seen by staff jumping off the side of the castle walls between the bastions Leerdam and Orange, which perplexed workers there, as of course there was never any bodies found. Now, this place is jam-packed with ghastly tales, but one of the most disturbing is that of a soldier found hanging from the bell rope in the bastion's bell tower sometime in the 1700s. After his death, the bell tower was completely sealed off. However, still to this day, there are numerous reports of the same bell ringing morbidly and striking on its own accord. Next up at number 4, Banff Springs Hotel, Alberta, Canada. Now, I know that the Overlook Hotel is based off of the Stanley Hotel in Chicago, but I mean, just look at this place, seriously. The Banff Springs Hotel was built in 1886 by the Canadian Pacific Railway in Alberta, Canada, as a Chateau-esque luxury stop-off point for railway travellers. King George VI and his wife Elizabeth even stayed there. However, all of this is mainly a ruse because it's rumoured to be one of the most haunted locations in the whole of Canada. The most horrific story surrounding the hotel is that of a bride-to-be who fell down a staircase on her wedding day in panic after her dress had caught fire, breaking her neck. Residents of the hotel report seeing the bride both on the staircase and in the ballroom dancing, with many people seeing flames dancing across the back of her dress. Perhaps the most popular of all reports is that of the former bellman Sam Macaulay, who served at the hotel through the 60s and 70s, yet still is seen by guests to this day. Allegedly, hundreds of people have been helped to their rooms by the ghostly bellman, often turning on lights and opening locked doors. Of course though, when they try to tip him, he vanishes. Ghosts don't need money, right? Coming in at number 3, the Monte Cristo Homestead, Australia. Allegedly the most haunted homestead in the whole of Australia, which resides in Junee, New South Wales, and has stood as a landmark to the tragic events that unfold when you decide to build a house in the absolute middle of nowhere. Built in 1885, the property got off to a pretty grim start before it was even finished built, when a pregnant caretaker who was overseeing the construction of the house was mysteriously pushed over a balcony and tragically killed. Later, a baby was thrown down the stairs, and later still, a stable boy tragically burned to death while he slept. Strange really, because we have to remember that this was in the middle of nowhere, and you know, the amount of people on the property was extremely limited. There wasn't exactly a passing trade to the place. Were they all victim to such terrible luck, or were there more nefarious machinations at work? Well, the house lay completely abandoned for 30 years after its continued string of misfortune, and was purchased by the Ryan family, who still live there to this day, keeping it as a relic of the paranormal world. Spooky, eh? Swinging in at number 2, the Hellfire Club, Ireland. Because nothing says more haunted than the literal name, the Hellfire Club. In fact, Hellfire Club was the name of several exclusive clubs for high society aristocrats back in the 18th century, primarily in Britain and Ireland. It was kind of an old boys club, but was most definitely a satanic cult. Probably, don't quote me on that one. For us to say that this is a definitive location is a little bit of a mistruth, because in fact there are multiple Hellfire clubs across the planet. The established and most notorious being the one built in London in 1764, but the one that makes this list is in Montpellier Hill near Dublin, which is, if the legend is true, built on the haunted ruin of an ancient Celtic hunting lodge. Built in 1725 by parliamentarian William Connolly, it served as Ireland's occult site of the Hellfire Club, and these days you can even take a guided torchlight tour around its cavernous ruins. Some people say that the site is still used for occult ritual, while others mark it down as pure pomp and ceremony, an old boys drinking club with a few theatrics, but I want to chance that one, would you? And finally, at our number 1 spot, the Myrtles Plantation, Louisiana. And, well, of course, the most haunted home in America has to make our number 1 spot. The Myrtles Homestead is a former plantation located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and if the legends are true, then this place is an absolute hive of haunted paranormal activity. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, first and foremost the plantation house is rumoured to be built on top of an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. That would be the first red flag, right? Well, on top of that, the house is supposedly the site of at least 10 historical murders, the majority of which still remain a mystery. The most renowned legend is that of a slave named Chloe, who was hanged after poisoning the owner at the time's daughters, Judge Clark Woodruff, who later went into a fit of rage and murderous intent. On hundreds of occasions, the ghost of Chloe has supposedly been spotted around the property, often taking the form of a little girl or a middle-aged woman covered in blood. Another of these alleged ghosts is that of William Winter, a very popular character at the plantation, who was mysteriously shot by a stranger. After being mortally wounded, he staggered inside the house as he tried to climb the stairs and tragically died on the 17th step. As the legend goes, in the dead of night, you can still hear his dying footsteps making their way up the staircase. Spooky stuff.
And coming in at number 5, the Catacombs. Okay, so not really a home. Well, kinda. Home to about 6 million people who have passed on. The Paris Catacombs is an underground labyrinth of tunnels which once served the city for the usage of quarrying and mining. The 6-mile deep, fully enclosed tomb maze tunnel museum hybrid thing was once a quiet and quaint tunnel. Empty and spacious. But what could we use all this space for? And once the cemeteries of Paris started overflowing, people really didn't know where to put all of the remains. Light bulb. Charles Axel Guillemot was tasked with transferring the remains of all prior collapsed cemeteries to their new home underground in the unused mine shafts that now stretched across and under the streets of Paris. He was the inspector of the Department of General Quarry Inspection, and so it began. Buggy load after buggy load in the middle of the night, people just mix, match, and bones to carefully and aggressively, yet strategically, pack about 6 million people under there. I say strategic because just look at it. My shelves at home aren't this organized. It's basically a library of human bones mile for mile. That's crazy! So not only do you have like the chances of running into a ghost, you have the chances of running into like 6 million of them. That would be one where you definitely see ghosts interacting with different ghosts from different eras. The site was consecrated as the Paris Municipal Ossuary, April 7th, 1786, and from that time forward took on the mythical and giant nickname of its time, the Catacombs. It was born, well, the name is a reference to the Roman catacombs, in which had something of an overflowing problem as well. The catacombs gained attention from the public and began opening its doors and tours in 1809. Although this isn't really someone's active home where they get up, make their bed, I thought I would mix it up and talk about places that are considered a home instead of just haunted house after haunted house. The gateway to hell. I don't think I'll be seeing that anytime soon. Nope. Number 4. Cabin in the woods. A broad term. Usually when someone lives in a cabin in the woods, I'm already looking for an escape route. And an adult. Not just any cabin in the woods as well. I'd say the most revered, the most feared, and the most notorious cabin in the woods. Ed's house. I'm not going to glorify this man, nor will I really get into the sick details of his hobby, I guess you can call it. On this one I'm gonna keep it pretty loose, but trust me, you don't want to live there. Located in Plainfield, Wisconsin, the locals don't even want people going there. It's not up for sale, and in fact it's been bulldozed and unmarked in hopes to erase and forget what happened there almost half a century ago. This guy had a lot of nicknames, for which include the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul, but what really made this guy twisted was his fascination with furniture making? I'm not even sure if I can call it that. Hey, I'm all for DIY and being handy around the house, but this guy took it to an extreme level. When authorities kicked down the door to this once farmhouse, the interior decor was so shocking, so gruesome and disgusting, that I probably would have just sat there straight vomiting for hours. Google it for yourself and brush up on some history because I've done my homework, and the furniture that this man created, let me tell you, hand stitched. That's horrible! I can't even believe what I just said out loud is true. And it's true. And what helps me sleep at night is to think that most of the furniture that this man had decorated his house with, they had already passed on. You definitely do not want to call this place your home, as it would be the inspiration for movies such as Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and Psycho. Watch the movies. You get the point.
Coming in at number 3, the Ancient Ram in Gloucestershire, England. And oh boy is this a good one. England is an old place, and there's some ridiculously ancient buildings still knocking around that are used as taverns and pubs, still open to the public to this day. This particular rickety old place was built in 1145, the Ancient Ram Inn, that is believed to be the most haunted house in the entire British Isles. Some have even claimed in the entire world. The reason? Well, of course this place is built on the intersection of 2 ley lines, and if that's not enough, it's said to be built on top of an ancient pagan burial ground that resided on the property over 5,000 years ago. Who would prove that, eh? Over 800 years, this place has seen a lot of stuff. Patrons have reported full-bodied apparitions in their rooms and the overwhelming presence of evil entities. John, the current owner, reported that on his first night in the property in 1968, he was grabbed out of bed by his arm, dragged across the room and flung against the wall. After he did a bit of digging, he found evidence of ritualistic sacrifice and occult worship, finding 2 child skeletons beneath the basement staircase and numerous broken daggers. Of course, things are still pretty grim over there, and the tale of the Ancient Ram Inn being a hotspot for the paranormal still holds up to this day. Next up at number 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Florida, USA. Built in 1974, the St. Augustine Lighthouse is still in active use to this day, as well as serving as a museum to the weird and paranormal goings on around the Floridian area, and trust me, there is a lot of them. Now, although the current tower was built in 1974, the property and first few lighthouses were actually first built in the 1870s. As the tale goes, the man in charge of construction, Hezekiah Pitt, had 2 daughters that tragically died in an accident involving the lighthouse catwalk while it was being built, and the apparitions of 2 girls have been widely reported by both visitors and staff, often seeing them walking up the upper sections along the winding inner staircase. On top of that, the apparition of a woman has also been witnessed standing on the staircase crying out for help. Now, there's been quite a lot of paranormal study at this place, often being claimed to be the Mona Lisa of paranormal sites, with people claiming to have hard recorded evidence of a ghostly entity. Spooky stuff. And finally, at our number 1 spot, the haunted vicarage, Borgvatnet, northern Sweden. And this place is spooky. Seriously. Now, Borgvatnet, a tiny village in Jämtland County, northern Sweden, may as well only be known for its vicarage, renowned to be the most haunted property in Sweden. The old vicarage, built in 1876, has so many haunting tales that it's hard to know when to begin, but when pretty much all of those tales feature priests, it's pretty telling to the severity of their ghostly infestation. The first ghost ever documented there came in 1927, when the chaplain at the time, Nils Hedlund, reported a violent, unseen presence that would follow him around the house, paranormally hurtling objects through the air and taunting him in his sleep. The next priest, Rudolf Tangden, who lived there throughout the 1930s, would often see an old woman dressed in grey appear in his room, who would try and get him to follow her before vanishing before his eyes. Literally every priest and chaplain that has stayed there has reported ghostly occurrences. On one occasion, a woman was staying in the guest room when she awoke in the middle of the night to see 3 old women sitting by her bedside staring right at her. The woman quickly turned on the light, yet the 3 women were still there before fading away through a blurry visage. Now that's spooky stuff, right?
Coming in at number 5, Monte Cristo Homestead, New South Wales, Australia. Monte Cristo Homestead is a historic homestead in the town of Junee, New South Wales, Australia, constructed back in 1885 by local pioneer Christopher William Crawley. It is a double-story Victorian-style manor which is located on a hill overlooking the rest of the town. The family remained in the home until around 1948. The house then stood empty under the care of several caretakers until 1963, when it was purchased by Reg and Olive Ryan, who restored it. Some of the ghosts inhabiting the home are said to include a young child who was supposedly dropped down the stairs, a maid who fell from the balcony, and a stable boy who was said to have burned to death. However, visitors to the homestead say that the most active ghost is the son of the caretaker, who was found curled up next to the dead body of his mother. Very creepy indeed. The homestead now operates as a museum and tourist attraction, advertising itself as Australia's most haunted house. The homestead was also featured in television shows such as A Big Country back in 1977, the travel show Getaway in 92, the paranormal-based game reality show Scream Test in 2000, Ghost Hunters International in January 2010, and My Ghost Story in 2013. Coming in at number 4, Chateau de Brissac, France. The Chateau de Brissac is a French chateau located in France, with the property being owned by the Cossé-Brissac family, whose head bears the French noble title of Duke of Brissac. It was originally built as a castle back in the 11th century, and it was rebuilt in 1611, and its construction made it the tallest chateau in France. The home is notoriously haunted, with some of the ghosts spotted at this castle-turned-hotel, including La Dame Verte, Green Lady, who was apparently the illegitimate child of King Charles VII. Anne was later murdered by her husband in the chateau in the 15th century after he caught her having an affair. Visitors often report seeing her ghost in the tower room of the chapel wearing her green dress with gaping holes where her eyes should be. She is also reported to roam the castle and make moaning sounds, startling visitors. The chateau is currently open to the public for tours and overnight stays in its guest rooms, and the luxurious gilded theatre hosts the annual Val d'Or Festival.
Number 3, Tower of London. Okay, so you're not going to find this place on Kijiji looking for renters, but at one point it was a home. Actually a couple homes, for a couple different people, through a couple different centuries. Considered to be one of the most haunted places on the planet, the Tower of London, erected in 1066, has been the home to some pretty cruel and infamous leaders. It also has a curfew. The White Tower, which gives the entire castle its name and origin, was built and completed by William the Conqueror in 1078. When I say built by him, it was built by other people. It's not actually built by him. He pointed and said, "Hey, build it," and now it's there. No one named William the First is moving rubble himself. Sitting just beside the River Thames, it was a strategic location. Steps away from transit and water. Hey, that's not bad. And around 10:15 at night, the entire premises of now Fortress is located up in ceremony. Just a guy taking like 3 hours to lock 899 doors and chambers every night. What happens if you need to make a run for toothpaste? Hello? Yep, it's locked. Over the last 1,000-ish years, this fortress has been home to more than 53 families, in which mostly all of them had an infestation problem. Ghosts. See, this place wasn't just a home for royalty, it was once a jail, torture chamber, military fortress, armory, treasury, bank, you name it, it was it. And it's not just a tower, it's like 20 towers. This place is megalithic, and the rent would be pretty costly. What would the energy bill be alone? I chose the Tower of London due to its 1,000 years of renters and 1,000 years of cruelty, you know, like stretchings and beheadings, that sort of stuff. You're just up in the middle of the night for a midnight snack and there's just ghost knights battling in your kitchen. Hey, guys, the swords are a little loud, kids are up at 8, okay? It's a respect thing. The Tower of London is active, open, and riddled with tours. Its history is rich and ruthless, and it's claimed space on this planet forever, and remains a symbol of the British Empire and the entirety of her dark history. Number 2, McCamey Manor. A modern and quaint Summertown, Tennessee home. McCamey Manor is an American haunted house attraction. This survival story horror event hybrid is performed and enacted by actors and the owner himself and operator, Russ. The home and owner of creator Russ McCamey and his family, this extreme haunted attraction is barely a funhouse, barely a haunted house. It's more like a full-on immersive experience of your worst fears. It was founded in San Diego by Russ and originally located on his property. To be exact, his backyard, garage, and basement. Do some homework, this place isn't for the faint of heart, trust me. The original 10-hour experience was so disturbing that there was a $20,000 reward at the end of the tour. If you've seen any scary movie in which involves rope, duct tape, and carrying someone at some point, then the tormentors, or actors, that Russ has hired for such events do exactly that, for like 8 hours straight. The house operates year-round, offering visitors tours and has months of waiting lists. Guests need to sign a liability waiver just to participate. That's a pretty serious viewing. Items on the waiver include the inability to leave. Yeah, that's kind of a deal breaker right there for me. You can't leave until we say. Guests are subject to various forms of physical and psychological torture, including having bones broken, teeth removed without anesthesia, and being drugged. Sounds aggressive, but Russ says that the guests get so into the attraction that they do some of the harm themselves. That's right, you see, Russ is very careful to ensure that it is completely and yet an immersive yet fake experience. The whole thing is videotaped for safety purposes, and authorities are included in knowing when and who these experiments are happening to and on which day. McCamey Manor has attracted significant controversy though, criticism and media scrutiny over the years due to its 27,000 participants and its impact on the surrounding area. Many believe that it's an unsafe adventure and have called it taboo things like torture. Hey, you don't kink shame someone, okay? Some people like to be fish hooked and spiders crawling all over them for 6 hours straight. Maybe you're just vanilla. This is like Hell Week for the seals, but like clowns and fake blood and stuff. Yeah, no way, I'm out. If you're feeling brave, Russ has publicized the adventure and numerous testimonies and documentaries have been done surrounding this immersive tour, which gives you a pretty good indication of what to expect. I would safe word in like the first 8 seconds of arriving. Hey, where do I park? Banana pudding! Banana pudding! I said it! And number 1, Skinwalker Ranch. This last one is a unique one. Tried to mix it up a little with this list, and this one is definitely a home you don't want any part of. The name alone will make your skin crawl. Or walk. Either or. Literally. Skinwalker Ranch is the home to paranormal and scientific researchers and has had them scratching their heads for at least the last 20 years. Thought to be one of the most interesting and bizarre places on Earth, it's home to some pretty weird stuff. Aliens. That's right, Skinwalker Ranch, or Sherman Ranch, which is located in Ballard, Utah, has had its fair share of orbs, UFOs, UAPs, cattle mutilations, and many other unexplainable paranormal events. Skinwalker, originally from the Navajo word for an unruly spirit who shapeshifts into animals or creatures, first occupied by the people of the land, then the Myers, then the Shermans, Bigelow, and new owner Brandon Fugel have all had their fair share of strange events. Robert Bigelow, owner of Bigelow Aerospace, a net worth of $700 million. Huh. Yeah, that guy's definitely seen an alien for sure. He's definitely one of the men in black. He has to be. Bigelow conducted experiments from '96 to 2016, and still, no definitive answers. Or none that we know of course. The amount of cattle mutilation has given this ranch its reputation the most. Herds of cattle here, one moment, gone, another, back, has made the farm almost unfarmable, and now acts as a scientific hub for researchers and even a television cast. The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch is an active 3-part TV series exploring the nature of things that happen on a daily basis. Does the government know about this place? They must, right? All the UFO news lately, this had to be on my list. It's hard to even pinpoint what the ranch even is or does. Gravity's different there, technology fails there. I'm guessing there's just like a giant mothership under the ground messing everything up. What do you
Coming in number 5, we've got the Los Feliz Murder Mansion. Also a great name for an instrumental math rock band or maybe a spooky improv group. Feel free to use it as long as you invite me to the first show. The Los Feliz Murder Mansion is exactly what it sounds like. A mansion in Los Feliz where somebody was murdered. It goes further than that, as the circumstances surrounding the murder are quite grisly indeed. In the late 50s, this house belonged to Dr. Harold Perelson, a family man with a successful career. Those last 2 bits were just for show though, as there was plenty of darkness hidden beneath the veneer of respectability. On one fateful night, he decided enough was enough and found his trusty hammer. Using this carpentry tool as an improvised weapon, he ended the life of his wife in brutal fashion. One attack wasn't enough either, as Dr. Perelson went after his daughter as well. Thankfully, he wasn't able to finish her off, but she was still gravely injured. Realizing what he had done, he decided to drink enough acid to burn through his insides and send him on to the afterlife. Chilling, to say the least. What would drive a person to commit such an act? After this all became public knowledge, people avoided the home for a while. The place where something so horrid happened can't be comfortable to sit around in. However, after a while, a family bought up the property and used it largely for storage. That's probably a safer bet than actually living there, eh? In 2016, the place was cleared out and most of the remaining stuff was auctioned off. Then it sold in 2019 and someone new moved in. Maybe time did a nice revision and people forgot what had happened there. Although it doesn't seem as though the ghosts are very violent or surly. No, the hauntings here largely consist of things being moved around without anyone present. And speaking of present, there have also been reports of unexplainable Christmas gifts appearing around the house. Maybe these ghosts feel bad for how things went down and have decided to live a lovely family life once more. Interesting. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Marr residence. The older a building is, the more likely it is to be haunted, yeah? Can we accept that as a fact of life? Good, good. So it should stand to reason that the Marr residence, located in Saskatoon, is probably bursting at the seams with phantoms. This house was actually built way before the city even incorporated and is the longest standing building in the area. Of course it would accumulate some ghosts over the years. The main way folks might have ended up tethered to this home in the afterlife is through its use as a field hospital in 1885. Hospitals often find themselves creating many ghosts, as folks who suffer for extended periods of time or go before they're ready tend to stick around afterwards. The Marr residence also has a long history of different folks deciding to live there for a while, so any number of tenants may be haunting the halls. One ghost in particular causes a whole lot of issues. Appearing as an elderly, angry man, the phantom flies around, tormenting any woman who enter the house. Some things never change, eh? No matter what era you pull an angry dude from, he'll always find a way to harass some woman he doesn't know. Classic. So if you're really freaked out, don't worry. The Marr residence actually offers a virtual tour on the website, meaning you can shuffle around this creaky home without having to put yourself in the way of any spectral presences. They've also made an attempt to connect with all the cool youths out there by starting up a TikTok account. I can't vouch for its efficacy, but at least they're trying. Ghost stories in real life just don't have the same pull as online ones anymore. Interestingly enough, it seems to be a popular destination for weddings too, so if you really want, you can book your next event at the Marr residence. There might be more than one lady in white though, and nobody can really get mad at ghosts for upstaging a bride.
In at number 3, Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. Located in San Jose, California, the Winchester Mystery House is a mansion that was once the private residence of Sarah Winchester, the widow of firearm magnate William Wirt Winchester. The Victorian mansion is renowned for its size, its architectural curiosities, and its lack of any master building plan. Since its construction all the way back in 1886, the home was claimed by many to be haunted by the ghosts of those killed with Winchester rifles. Following the death of both her husband and infant daughter, a medium told Sarah Winchester that she should leave her home in New Haven and travel west, where she must continuously build a home for herself and the spirits of people who had fallen victim to Winchester rifles. So she headed for California, seeking a new location and a hobby during her depression. In 1884, she purchased an unfinished home in Santa Clara Valley and began building her epic mansion. She opted to not use an architect, so the building is a little peculiar. The building contains numerous oddities, including doors and stairs that lead to nowhere, windows overlooking other rooms and stairs with odd-sized risers. Environmental psychologists have actually attributed the odd layout itself to the feeling of the house being haunted. Prior to 1906, the house was 7 stories high, which is insane. However, after the earthquake that same year, the home was reduced to just 4 stories. In 2017, the Winchester Mystery House actually debuted their first tour in 20 years called the Explore More Tour. This takes guests through the rooms never before open to the public, and explores the rooms left unfinished at the time of Sarah Winchester's death. In at number 2, we have Ancient Ram Inn, Gloucestershire. This is one of 2 locations from the UK that is renowned for being one of the most haunted hotels in the entirety of England. The Ancient Ram Inn is a former pub located in Watton-under Edge in Gloucestershire. The inn's original use was to house the masons and other builders employed to construct the church nearby. However, it was later taken up as the dwelling of the first recorded vicar. Following this, it was then converted to an inn. Now, many visitors have reported that when you enter the old inn, there is a definite feeling of dread and foreboding that envelops you. One person even stated, I quote, "The atmosphere was awful. I can only describe it as pure filth, dark and heavy." And on top of that, visitors have also reported while ascending the staircase to the first floor, being thrown up the stairs by some invisible force. On the first floor of the Ram Inn is said to be the most haunted room in the home, the Bishop's Room. It was said that a medium pushing open the door was once lifted off the ground and flung across the room. Many ghostly apparitions have been seen in that room. A ghostly cavalier has been known to materialize by the dressing table, and 2 monks have been seen shimmering in one corner. Many witnesses have also heard terrified screams of a man who was reportedly murdered in the inn by having his head thrust into a fire. The attic of the inn is also renowned for its ghostly activity, with it being said that an innkeeper's daughter was murdered in the roof space back in the early 1500s, and people who have slept in the Bishop's Room have reported hearing the sounds of something heavy being dragged across the floor above their heads. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Borley Rectory, Essex, England. Borley Rectory was at one point in time regarded as the most haunted house in England, which is pretty damn terrifying considering the country's lengthy history. The house was built in 1862 to house the rector of the parish of Borley and his family. However, when 1939 rolled around, it was badly damaged in a fire, and then in 1944 it was ultimately demolished. However, the paranormal activity and creepy occurrences on the property date back all the way to the 1860s, during which time many locals recounted hearing unexplained footsteps within the home at the time. Then on July 28, 1900, 4 daughters of the rector, Henry Dawson and Ellis Bull, saw what they believed to be the ghost of a nun about 40 yards from the house. They attempted to talk to the ghost, however, it disappeared as they got closer. Jumping forward in time, Harry Bull passed away on June 9, 1927, resulting in the rectory once again becoming vacant, and the following year the Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into the home. Shortly after the family moved in, they reported a variety of incidents, including the sounds of servant bells ringing despite them being disconnected, lights appearing in windows, and unexplained footsteps. On top of that, Smith's wife also reported seeing a horse-drawn carriage in the middle of the night. The hauntings at the Borley Rectory became so widespread that the Daily Mirror sent a reporter to the home to write a handful of articles detailing the strange goings-on. The Daily Mirror brought along Harry Price, a paranormal researcher, on June 12th of that year, and immediately the supernatural occurred. Stones were thrown, as well as a vase and other objects. Spirit messages were supposedly tapped out from the frame of a mirror, and as soon as Price left, the event ceased. As you would expect, the family left the home not long after this. Then, like I said, on February 27th, 1939, the new owner W.H. Gregson accidentally knocked over an oil lamp in the hallway, resulting in the house being severely damaged by fire, and then ultimately it was torn down. The place is said to be so haunted that Ed and Lorraine Warren housed one of the Borley Rectory bricks in their Connecticut museum.
Coming at number 5, we've got LaLaurie Mansion. Few houses have the history and horror stories to match this New Orleans landmark. Over the years, many tales of terror have been attached to it, all with colorful characters and public intrigue at the center. If you do end up visiting New Orleans, make sure you're on the lookout when you're close to the LaLaurie Mansion. Some folks claim that just being outside of the building can cause folks to feel intense negative energy. Let's delve into the details a little, why don't we? Anyone who's interested in New Orleans ghost stories undoubtedly knows about this mansion. Some forego the proper title and simply call it the Ghost House, which is a pretty apt descriptor. Since the 19th century, paranormal happenings have been reported stemming from the home. A lot of these rumors can be traced back to Delphine LaLaurie, a woman who married thrice and lost her husband each time. In addition to her questionable track record with marriage, Delphine LaLaurie also had slaves living on the property. Though common at the time, people looked at her a little differently for this, especially as it was said that she did not treat these people very well at all. In fact, a lot of the ghosts folks claim to see there are often traced back to the slaves that she kept. Some say that a young girl leapt from an upstairs window of the mansion, unwilling to continue living under the strict and cruel rule of Madame LaLaurie. Others say that the slaves there would disappear from time to time, only to be replaced a little bit down the road. The scariest story though comes from the time that the mansion almost burned down. After a fire swept through the house, it was revealed that a group of slaves had been kept locked away in a hidden room, chained to the walls, totally emaciated. To make matters worse, rumors started to spread that LaLaurie had performed horrifying experiments on them. From then on, Madame LaLaurie was seen as a villain, a criminal, a mad scientist. And while none of these experiments have been properly confirmed, their influence still remains to this day. There's some scary history attached to this house, and many people still claim to see the ghosts of people who once lived there roaming about after dark. Coming in at number 4, we've got Craigdarroch Mansion. Sticking with the haunted mansion theme for a little while, this little Canadian gem is packed to the gills with ghost stories. Any sort of old-fashioned mansion is probably subject to similar scrutiny, but this one in particular seems to capture the attention of many. This mansion was was being built for Robert Dunsmuir, a rich coal baron who wanted a luxurious home. Unfortunately, he never did get to live as lavishly as he would have liked, as he passed away a year before it was completed. Could it be that his restless soul refused to pass on without getting his money's worth? Is he the ghost swooping through the ornate hallways? Well, that could be the answer, or at least part of it. Craigdarroch Mansion doesn't just get its reputation from one singular ghost. There are many that call these dusty rooms home. In fact, one more important figure in the house's completion perished before it was ready for living. The chief architect of the mansion didn't quite make it to the ribbon cutting ceremony. Tragic and a little ironic. So that's 2 down that poured themselves into this home and never got to see it at its finest. The entire Dunsmuir clan seems to have a haunted stake here, as explorers have come across many other family members during their time in the mansion. Joan Dunsmuir has been seen walking through the halls in a ball gown, and a young girl has been spotted in the basement, supposedly their daughter. Her cries can be heard throughout the mansion, which is definitely unsettling. The last thing I'll mention about this one is the piano. It's a lovely old thing and still sounds pretty good. However, no matter how good a piano sounds, nobody wants to hear it playing when the room is totally empty. This keyboard is known to be used in some phantom performances, spooking even the most devout music fans out there. I wonder if the ghost takes requests. Coming in number 3, we've got the Morgan House. Another tale of familial terror. This house is situated in Kalimpong, India. A husband-wife duo moved in, sharing the last name Morgan. Of course, that's where this house got its famous name. At first, all seemed well with this young couple. They kept up appearances, went about their daily chores, and ensured that all looked well. However, they were hiding a dark secret. Mr. Morgan supposedly tortured his wife behind closed doors, beating her and performing terrible acts. She had no way to leave him, so all she could do was endure. As time went on, the torture got worse, and Miss Morgan was desperate for a way out. She stopped seeing friends, ceased leaving the house, and eventually became a total shut-in. And after all that, it was too much. She took her own life, leaving Mr. Morgan to abandon the property. For decades, the house was left in this state, empty, dusty, and home to a ghost. But eventually, the Indian government stepped in and revitalized the structure, making it into a boutique hotel. The ghost story doesn't end there though. Guests at this hotel often hear the clicking of high heels and the sobbing of a woman in distress. Those who know the story of the Morgans understand that this is a sign that Miss Morgan is near, even all these years later. Coming in at number 2, we've got Casa de la Poesia, or the House of Poetry. That doesn't sound too spooky, but poets tend to be pretty morbid, don't you think? Once belonging to Colombian poet Jose Asuncion Silva, this was a place of tragedy. Silva lived a life largely void of pleasure or triumph. Although he did publish some wildly influential and successful poetry, a lot of what happened in his life surrounding his writing was very sad. His only friend, his sister, died too young, leaving him all alone. His best manuscripts were lost in a shipwreck, and his family fell upon hard times, resulting in economic ruin. Needless to say, this lonely poet wasn't a very happy individual. Eventually, after putting out enough work to support himself for a few years, Silva took his own life at the age of 30. After this, people began to hear whispers and shuffling from within the house, likely thanks to the ghost of Silva, a moody poet even in the afterlife. These days, the house is a museum. Guests come here for the poetry and the poltergeistery. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Villisca Axe Murder House. Now, most of the houses on this list are well known for having a spooky atmosphere and trying to make people afraid simply through backstories. However, visitors are often pleasantly surprised by how little harm they do. Ghosts have a tough time actually hurting folks after all. The Villisca Axe Murder House has spooky legends and horrifying repercussions in spades. Made famous for a gruesome string of murders back in the early 20th century, folks have always been a little afraid of this shack. No running water, no power, no hope. After the young family was famously murdered and no explanation was discovered, rumors of ghosts and ghouls proliferated. Even today, most paranormal enthusiasts don't seem to want to actually spend a night. In fact, one investigator did in 2014 and did his best to find out what he could. In the end, he only ended up with a self-inflicted stab wound. So be careful when dealing with this fascinating old home. Who knows what you might see, hear, or think. Who wants to put in an offer on one of these?
Coming in at number 5, we have the Lizzie Borden House in Massachusetts. Lizzie Borden was an American woman who became the center of a sensational trial in the United States. In 1892, she was accused of killing her father and stepmother. Her family was well off and lived in the town of Fall River in Massachusetts. Her father had remarried 3 years after Lizzie's mother had died. Lizzie also had an older sister, Emma. They often argued with their father regarding their finances and their stepmother. Lizzie was well liked in the community and spent her days involved with various charity work. Her father was not well liked though. He was known to be stubborn and cruel. On the morning of August 4th, 1892, Mr. Borden left his home for work. Left in the house was Lizzie, the stepmother, and a live-in maid. Her sister was out of town at the time. When he returned from work, it was reported that he sat down in the living room and had a nap. No one knows exactly what happened to Mr. and Mrs. Borden next, but Lizzie gave her version of events. Lizzie claims to have returned home at around 11:15. Upon her return, she found her father brutally attacked on the sofa. Upstairs, his wife's body was found mutilated. It was later confirmed she had died around an hour before her husband. There was little evidence to what had actually happened to the Bordens. Lizzie had suspicious activity that made it seem likely that she was involved. On August 3rd, Lizzie had purchased some poisonous acid. It was also found that she had burned some of her clothing on the stove, and in the days following the murder, the maid was also suspected of the killing. She was seen leaving the home carrying an unexamined parcel in the evening following the murder. No weapon was ever found, though they did suspect the axe that was found in the basement. Lizzie was arrested and tried, but was acquitted due to the lack of evidence. It was widely believed she was guilty. She was shunned by her community. She would stay in the family home until she died of old age in 1927. The house is reportedly haunted by both Lizzie's spirit and Mr. and Mrs. Borden. Coming in at number 4, we have Merchant House Museum in New York. The Merchant House is the only 19th century family home that has been preserved. The house was built in 1832 by a wealthy merchant. The merchant Seabury Treadwell raised his family in the home. He had 8 children. The home was never empty as the family constantly grew, with 4 servants, nieces, nephews, cousins, and aunts all staying at the home from time to time. Most of the family lived there until their old age. The youngest daughter, Gertrude, lived there alone for 24 years after the death of her older sister. She was eccentric and became obsessed with holding on to the family home in its original state. The neighborhood around her home was run down. Many of the homes around it were demolished. As you can see today, the home stands alone in its elegance. After she died in 1933, a distant cousin purchased the house to ensure it was not demolished. He turned the home into a museum, a time capsule of what it was like to live in the 19th century. Still has the original possessions from the family. Not everything in the home was idyllic. There are some ghosts that linger in the home, other than those of the family members who refused to leave even in death. There is a famous story, the thief who tried to steal from the family. It was said he broke in one night while the family slept. He stole a lot of jewels and valuables from the home. He was attempting to make his escape through a hole he had made in one of the weaker walls. As he squeezed through the hole, the wall collapsed on top of him. He did not survive. He was found by the family in the morning. The thief's brother apparently demanded justice. He claimed that the wall should not have been made so poorly. It was the bad quality of the wall that killed his brother. Obviously, this was not seen as a valid concern. The thief's ghost is reported to still be lingering in the home. Luckily, the house is now a museum and not a hotel, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with the ghosts. There have been various sightings. Someone saw one of the daughters sat in the garden. As they walked towards the girls, she disappeared. A man covered in a dust like soot had been seen around the kitchen, believed to be the thief. Many guests feel cold spots around the house. At least the majority of the ghosts are friendly. The Treadwell family are just enjoying their beloved home.
Coming at number 3, we've got the Lizzie Borden house, a classic tale of axe murders and acquittals. This is a story that has remained famous for years and even now gets a fair deal of attention. Lizzie Borden was accused of murdering her parents with an axe way back in the late 19th century. Plenty was said and in-depth investigations were performed, but Lizzie got off scot-free. Well, actually, her neighbors never seemed to believe that she was innocent, but Lizzie faced no legal repercussions for this event. However, the house in which it happened is said to house both the spirits of Lizzie and her victims. After dying at the age of 66, Lizzie apparently returned home. People who visit the house have told stories about seeing the ghosts of her headless victims wandering about the house, along with a panicked maid who discovered the bodies. Lizzie's around too, although she makes herself known with a laugh. It's said that she laughed while killing her parents and laughed when she got away with it, so it makes sense that she'd still be chuckling in the afterlife. Do you think all the ghosts get along at this point? Or is it an eternity of enmity? I suppose you'll have to visit to find out. Coming at number 2, we've got the Sally House. To preface this, I want to let you know that the Sally House is bookable. You can pay something like $150 to spend a night in one of the most haunted houses in America. Pretty good deal, right? Sure, you can't cook and the basement's off limits and nobody's allowed to sleep in the beds, but come on, where else can you get an opportunity like this? The Sally House got its haunted start thanks to a botched appendectomy. At the time, a doctor lived there and ran his practice out of the house. One day, a woman came in with a very ill child. child. The doctor deduced that the kid needed their appendix removed before it burst. However, it was already set to blow and there was no time to waste. So they attempted to sedate the girl but couldn't wait any longer for the effects to kick in. They began the surgery before the kid was properly sedated and she could feel everything. Her screams echoed throughout the house but nothing could be done. In the end, the surgery was a failure and the doctor was crestfallen. His patient, unable to really understand what was going on, had passed away under the knife, believing the doctor to be torturing her. Since then, her angry spirit has haunted the home, tossing objects around, whispering and scratching in the night, and shoving male guests whenever they arrive. And finally, at number 1, we've got the White House. There are so many reasons to avoid the White House wholesale. By taking up residence there, you're just asking for trouble. But beyond the 24-hour news cycle and the ever-present online scrutiny, there are plenty more classical paranormal reasons to leave the White House well alone. Throughout American history, different presidents who have lived in the White House have reported strange happenings. Sometimes there might be a knock at one's bedroom door with no one on the other side. Others claim to have seen previous politicians and aides floating down the halls at night. Abraham Lincoln was regularly visited by his late son, and after he was assassinated, he seemed to return to the White House in similar fashion. With all of the important figures that have visited this location over the years and all of the high-stakes events connected with the structure, there's no doubt that the White House is haunted in one way or another. So try to avoid accepting any dinner invites unless you want to be haunted or sniffed.
In at number 5, we have Mudhouse Mansion. The Mudhouse Mansion is believed to have been built sometime between 1840 and 1850. There is a lot of mystery around the home and the different tales of what has happened here. In 1892, a man bought the home for him, his wife, and their 3 children. Once they moved into the home, the neighbors did not see them. They wanted to wait for them to settle in before going to introduce themselves. After a few weeks passed and they still didn't see the family, one neighbor went in to investigate the home. She saw a woman dressed in white at the second floor window. She did not move, she just stared at her. She went back the next day to see if there had been any change. She saw the woman again in the same place. She repeatedly checked in on the home, but on the 10th day she called the police as the figure did not move in any of the time that had passed. The police broke down the door to investigate. They found each family member dressed in white hanging from the staircase. The figure that she had seen all of those times was the wife hanging in front of the window. They had been hanging there for several weeks. There is folklore that the house is the original location of the witch Bloody Mary. They say the land is cursed and anyone who lives there will perish. The house remained empty for the rest of its years. It attracted ghost hunters. One woman claimed that she was on the second floor when she heard a loud group people on the third floor. When she went to ask them what was happening, she found she was alone in the home. The voices stopped and no one was on the third floor. The house was demolished in 2015 due to growing fears from the surrounding area. The home had been empty since the 1930s due to fear of what had happened here. If the folklore is true, any home built on the land will also carry the curse. In at number 4, S.K. Pierce Mansion. Sylvester Pierce was a wealthy businessman from Massachusetts. He started his business S.K. Pierce & Sons Furniture Company. The company was extremely successful for the family. In the late 1880s, Pierce decided he should build a mansion befitting his fortune. The mansion he built was a marvel for its time. The home was 7,000 square feet with 10 bedrooms. It took 16 months and 100 men to build this home. The family moved in swiftly as the grand home was completed, but their celebrations didn't last long when his wife Susan fell down the staircase a few weeks after moving in. She sustained many injuries but did not die from the fall. She did die from a bacterial illness she got in one of her wounds. After a year of mourning, Pierce remarried Ellen. This was widely talked about as she was 30 years younger than him. Pierce passed away in 1888, leaving behind his new wife and the 2 sons they had together and his son from the previous marriage. When Ellen passed, the sons argued constantly over who would take the home and business. The Great Depression destroyed the business, leaving only the mansion to decide. Eventually it was given to the youngest son. The mansion went through hard times as the family lost the fortune. Edward decided to turn the mansion into a boarding home. The home was used for drinking, gambling, and other activities people wanted to do in secret. There were even a number of murders that occurred. One woman was strangled in one of the second floor rooms by another boarder. A Finnish immigrant burned to death in the master bedroom in 1963. There is also another story of a young boy who drowned in the basement when he ran off from his family. Since these days, the house has been regarded as haunted. There is no shortage of people who has passed here. There are also claims a dark entity inhabits the basement and may have been the cause of the young boy wandering off. Guests have experienced voices talking to them as they sleep. sleep, furniture moving without anyone being in the room, as well as shadow people caught in the corner of guests' eyes. The house is now open for ghostly tours, but no one may stay the night as it is considered too dangerous. Coming in at number 3, we have Villa de Vici in Italy. The Villa de Vici in Italy was built around 1854. It has the nickname the House of Witches. The house was riddled with tragedies from day one. Count Felix de Vici was head of the Italian National Guard. He was considered a decorated hero. He wanted to build a dream home for him and his family. He recruited architect Alessandro Sidoli. It took around 3 years to build the home. Alessandro died a year before the villa was completed. This would come to be seen as the first bad omen. Of course, at the time, it was simply an unfortunate event. Once finished, the home was a great mansion. It was outfitted with all the modern conveniences of the time, including indoor heating. No expense was spared. The home had extensive gardens and promenades. Unfortunately, the family would not be able to enjoy their lives in the idyllic home. Sometime in 1862, the Count returned home from a day's work. He found his wife had been brutally attacked. It was too late to save her. More than that, his daughter had been taken. He had started a lengthy search for his daughter, using his best men to search as far as they were able. The daughter was never found. Later that same year, the staff found the Count in his study. He had taken his own life from the guilt of losing his family. The villa was passed from owner to owner for a few years. By the year 1960, the home would be left permanently uninhabited. The house fell into ruin. The walls have fallen and vandals have destroyed much of the interior. There are now rumors that occultists use the home for rituals. The home is said to be strongly connected to spirits and ghosts. Many entities have been spotted here. If you were to visit the home, you'd be able to sense those who have passed, along with the other spirits who have been called on by rituals. Coming in at number 2, we have Los Feliz Mansion in Los Angeles. Very little is known about the Los Feliz Mansion before it was bought by cardiologist Harold Perelson for his family. The family seemed to live there happily until 1959. Harold lived in the home with his wife and 3 children, the oldest named Judy. It was reported that Perelson was in a financial crisis. He had sunk thousands into a medical device he had invented only to have it stolen by a colleague. Things went from bad to tragic for the family on December 6, 1959. It's reported that Harold lost his mind. He woke at around 4:30 a.m. He took a hammer to his wife. He then went to his daughter's room. He tried to do the same thing to Judy, but failed. She managed to escape screaming. She ran to the neighbors where she could call the police. The 2 younger children woke up during the screaming. Harold told them to go back to sleep and that they were having a nightmare. Harold then went back to his study. He took 2 doses of something and 31 pills before lying down. He had passed by the time the police and ambulance arrived on the scene. The house has sat untouched since this happened. The house was purchased by a family, but they chose to leave everything in the house as they found it. They never spent a single night in the home, but came and went with storage. It is rumored that if you go to visit the house, you can still see the Christmas tree in the living room, surrounded by the presents neatly wrapped, as well as a Life magazine on the coffee table along with other signs of the time. And finally, in at number 1, we have Louis Family Mansion in Taiwan. The Louis Family Mansion, or more commonly known as Mingsong Ghost House, is one of the most haunted locations in Taiwan. The house, built in 1929, is situated in the countryside near Chiayi. The home was once a beautiful 3-story, perfect for any family. Looking at the home today, you can see the old charm, but the house is overgrown and a tapestry of trees that have claimed it over time. Louis Rongyu, an affluent merchant and landowner, bought the house for his family. It was rumored that he had started an affair with the maid. This affair went on for years without anyone knowing anything of it. Finally, the maid got tired of being a secret and confronted his wife. Louis Rongyu broke off the affair, choosing his family. The maid was reportedly distraught about what had happened. She jumped from the 2nd-story balcony into the well below. Some say another family member might have pushed her to save them the public embarrassment. After this, the ghost of the maid haunted the family every night, terrorizing them. She would not let them rest. It was not long before the family felt they had to move out, leaving their home behind. They never sold the property, it was simply left to rot. Perhaps they did not want anyone else to be terrorized by the angry spirit they had created. Dark tourists continue to visit the house. There have been various sightings of the ghost since then. People are warned not to spend the night, as this is when she looks for vengeance. Would you risk it? I certainly would. In at number 5, we have the Franklin Castle in Ohio. The high Victorian home has been a fixture of the city's west side for over 100 years. It was built in the 1880s by grocer turned banker Hans Tiedemann. Although his wealth was significant, Tiedemann's life was filled with tragedy. A distressing number of his immediate family members would die in this house. The story goes that the construction of the castle's elaborate turrets, prominent gargoyles, and increasingly large network of rooms were an attempt to distract his wife from the ceaseless endless amount of death. That is, until she too suddenly passed away. After Tiedemann sold the property, it spent several decades as a German cultural center. The tales of hauntings picked up in the 1960s, as reports of surging electricity, the sound of babies crying, and a mysterious woman in black gained steam. Human bones were found in a closet in 1975. It was never confirmed who the remains belonged to, but with the number of deaths within the home, it is believed to be one of the Tiedemann's family. As the years have gone by, tales of Franklin Castle have grown, and now include an axe murder, a mass shooting of in the basement, and the alleged hanging death of Tiedemann's illegitimate daughter. Many stories focus on heinous acts that supposedly took place in tunnels below the house. After a fire, the home laid abandoned for several years before the current owners purchased the place in 2011. In at number 4, we have the Sallie House in Kansas. If you're into ghost hunting shows, you probably already know this famous haunted house. The unassuming home in Kansas is rumored to be the dark lair for a demon who takes on the form of a little girl because of a family's bizarre experiences there. Built in the mid-1800s in the growing community of Atchison, 2nd Street has seen its fair share of owners through the years, including the family of a 6-year-old girl named Sally, who died in the home during a botched appendicitis surgery. It wasn't until the mid-1990s when Sally's story first gained both local and national attention, when then owners Tony and Deborah Pickman lived in the home and began noticing strange occurrences, including attacks on Tony, unexplained voices, and apparent burnt finger marks upon mysteriously burning candles. Sally isn't some harmless ghost. Theories around her malevolent presence in the house, as well as some evidence of satanic rituals in the basement, suggest that Sally is in fact a demon disguised as a young girl. It is believed that the family was desperate in their grief and decided to perform the ritual in an attempt to bring back their daughter. Instead, they invited a demon into the home and offered them her body as a vessel. Since then, the demon has terrorized the home. Paranormal investigators have confirmed the house is haunted, but none have so far been able to cast out the demon. The Sallie House is open to the public if this sounds like the holiday location for you. In at number 3, the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis, Missouri. The Lemp Mansion was built in 1890 in St. Louis. It was originally owned and built by William Lemp for his growing family. Lemp's father, Adam Lemp, was a German man who moved to the US in 1839. He became very successful when he opened a grocery and started to produce and sell authentic German lager. All things seemed to be going well for the Lemp family. Adam passed down his company to his son, William Sr. William went on to expand and grow the Western Brewery Company started by his father. He married his wife in 1861 and they moved into their new home in 1890. They had 4 children together, all boys who went on to work for the company. It was their youngest son Frederick who he had hoped to groom to inherit the entire company. In 1901, Frederick died due to heart failure from complications of his diseases. William Sr. became depressed from this. He lost his will to work. He slowly declined. His family's effort to console him did nothing to bring him back. In 1904, William Lemp took his own life by gunshot. With 2 tragedies in the family, they still kept going to try and recover from their losses, but there was still more to come from them. A few years later, his wife developed and passed from cancer, leaving the children, the home, and the company to run. William Jr. took over the company in his father's absence. He married, and they had 1 son, William III. Jesus. A few years later, she filed for divorce. She won custody of their son. The company also took a hit during the Prohibition when they had to shut down. They had to sell their trademark and the brewery complex was sold at auction. William struggled to deal with all of his immense loss. He did not see a way to recover all he had lost. He took his life in the same room as William Sr. had all those years prior. The house is said to now be haunted by the Lemp family and all of their tragedies. In at number 2, we have Hotel Cecil in Los Angeles, California. Hotel Cecil, or Stay on Main in LA, is probably one of the most well-known haunted locations. While it's not a house, it is a home for many people, as the building is not only a hotel but a residence. The hotel became the center of the Netflix documentary The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, which looked into the disappearance of Elisa Lam. The hotel opened in 1924. It was designed to be a high-end hotel for those traveling on business. The hotel quickly fell from the image they initially had. They advertised monthly and more permanent rates but now offer as short as hourly. Within the first 10 years of the hotel being open, many lost souls checked into the hotel who were never planning to check out. The first incident occurred in 1927, 3 years after opening. Guest Percy Cook had taken his own life. His wife had left him, taking their child. 4 years later, a man was found in his room after ingesting poison. Within the following 3 years, 2 more people took their lives. This quickly gained the hotel a dark reputation. People seemed to be drawn to the hotel as their final resting place. From 1937, the passings became more violent. People's lives started being taken by others. It was said all of the tragedies had cursed the hotel. Since 1937, 14 more people have passed away at the hotel. It is even rumored that in the case of Elisa Lam, she may have experienced hauntings meetings in the hotel before she disappeared. There was footage of her in a lift performing what is thought to be a ritual where you invite spirits to join you. This was the last anyone would ever see of her. She was later found in one of the water tanks on the roof. Could this have been connected to the ritual, or maybe she saw something else during her stay? And finally, in at number 1 we have Jean Harlow House, Los Angeles, California. When Jean Harlow was 18, she married Paul Byrne and moved into her famous Hollywood home. Jean was an actress famous for her roles in Double Whoopee and The Saturday Night Kid. She was seen as the latest blonde bombshell. Her personal life, however, would never be as successful as her acting career. Her marriage to Paul was her second. She married for the first time when she was only 16 years old. Her marriage to Paul was surprising to the public. He was 22 years older than her and not considered to be attractive. Their marriage only lasted 2 months before ending in tragedy. Paul Byrne had been married previously to Dorothy Millett. Paul hadn't spoken of Dorothy for years. His secrets finally caught up to him when he was found by his butlers deceased in his bedroom. He had a bullet wound through his head and a letter left next to him explaining why he ended his life. Authorities recovered the note and ruled the death by his own hands, but the staff pointed the fingers to Dorothy. She had visited him a day earlier. Jean had no knowledge of this. The police went to interrogate Dorothy only to find she had jumped from her hotel balcony. Jean sold and left the home after the incident. 5 years later, in 1937, Jean was on set filming Saratoga. She was found in her dressing room, passed out on the floor. She had suffered from kidney failure and died at the age of 26. In 1983, a hairstylist named J.C. Bring bought the former home. At the time, he was with Sharon Tate. Tate often stayed in the home. As most of us know, Sharon Tate also met an horrific end. She was a victim to Charles Manson while pregnant in 1969. Many people believe the house is cursed. Before her passing, Sharon Tate was questioned about the home. She was questioned in an interview about the suspected hauntings. She did experience some paranormal activity during her time there. She told them that she saw a ghostly man in her bedroom. She believed it to be Paul Byrne. She saw a second figure tied to the staircase. She said the second figure had a slit on their throat. She said it almost looked like her. Tate called it a premonition. Could Byrne have been trying to warn her? Either way, we know that the home houses the spirits of those who passed there.
Number 5 on this list is Panola Hall. Panola Hall is a beautiful Georgian home that is deeply haunted and also something that you could buy if your heart so desired. Rocket Homes says, Panola Hall was originally built for Henry Tripp in 1854, but its most popular resident is simply known as Sylvia. Said to be a young, beautiful, shy spirit, Sylvia typically appears on the stairwell with a rose in her hair and wearing a white hoop skirt dress. Her presence also brings about a strong smell of roses. The beautiful antebellum home is decorated with heart pine floors, 12-foot ceilings, a second floor balcony, and a secret tunnel. At the time of writing, this home has a pending offer. Now, I looked into this home, guys, and apparently you can buy it for around $700,000, which in all honesty, when looking at the property and everything that it has to offer, is a pretty good deal. Now, maybe they are factoring in the whole haunted by a spirit thing into the price, and that's dragging it down a little bit. Granted, this doesn't seem like the worst ghostly presence ever. Like, she smells like rose petals, so that's something that's pretty nice, and she's shy and pretty and probably pretty nice by the sounds of it. I do think that I would get triggered every time I smelled roses though. Like, think about if you were on the toilet and then you just got the sudden smell of roses. Now you know that Sylvia the ghost is watching you do your business, and I'm not sure if I would vibe with that so much. I don't know. This one is definitely a mixed bag for me. Sylvia seems nice, but I still think that I like my home ghost free if it's up to me. Number 4 on this list is the Pillars Estate. The Pillars Estate is a real blast from the past. Like, this home hasn't heard that we're in the year 2022 yet. Rocket Homes says, sometimes a homeowner loves their home so much they can find it difficult to leave even in the afterlife. Such is the case, many believe, for the Pillars Estate, an 1878 mansion in Albion, New York. The homeowner we're referring to is Myrtie Carr, who moved into the home with her husband William in the 1940s. It's said that Carr loved the home so much that she purportedly told one of her daughters that when she died she would never leave it. According to the current homeowner, Tony McMurdy, she's kept that promise. McMurdy, who has spent more than 10 years carefully restoring the home to its original splendor, has had his fair share of haunting experiences, including hearing doorknobs jiggling and seeing the apparition of a woman lying in bed. Despite the paranormal paranormal activity, it's believed that Kara's presence is warm and friendly, and that she's happy to see the care McMurdy has put into her beloved home. The Pillars estate in Albion, New York is one of the oldest homes in the area. When you turn that antique key and step inside, you go back in history. The restored home is filled with antique furnishings, many of which are included in the sale of the home. McMurdy also added an extravagant ballroom featuring a grand staircase, dark wood features, chandeliers, and a bar. So not only has the home not recognized its 2022, neither has Carr apparently. I personally have absolutely no interest in lying in bed and then being woken up by the feeling of a ghost lying right next to me. My bed is a sacred, ghost-free zone, and not even a cool 1850s house will make me give up on that.
In at number 3 we have Bell Witch Farm in Tennessee. In the early 1800s, John Bell bought a tract of farmland along Tennessee's Red River. Bell and his family thrived on the farm until they started to see strange looking animals around the property, most notably a dog with a rabbit's head. From that point on, the family was beset upon by unseen forces, largely targeted at Bell and his daughter Betsy. They experienced physical attacks, heard unexplained noises, and even spoke with the entity. What was the Bell Witch? Like most supernatural stories, certain details vary from version to version, but the prevailing account is that the Bell Witch claimed to be the spirit of Kate Batts, a mean old neighbor of John Bell who believed she was cheated by him in a land purchase. On her deathbed, she swore that she would haunt John Bell and his descendants. The human interactions with the spirits date all the way back to 1817. Former President Andrew Jackson was quoted as saying, "I had rather face the entire British army than to spend another night with the Bell Witch," after he and some of his troops spent a night at the Bell's farm. Over time, so many people traveled great distances to visit the Bell's home that it had to eventually be torn down for safety purposes in the latter part of the 1800s. The historic Bell Witch Cave has preserved some of the artifacts from the original cabin, such as a chimney stone and an iron kettle. You can see these articles along with some other artifacts, news articles and photos from the time John Bell and his family resided on the farm when touring the reconstructed Bell cabin. If you're interested in paranormal activity, or if you're a history buff, then the Bell Witch Cave and farm will definitely not disappoint. In at number 2 we have Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca. The small Iowa town of Villisca doesn't have much to offer tourists except for a night of terror at the Villisca Axe Murder House. Back in 1912, the whitewood framed house was the site of a horrifying crime that left an entire family dead by axe. Shortly after midnight on June 10, 1912, a stranger hefting an axe lifted the latch on the back door of a 2-story timber house in the little Iowa town of Villisca. The door was not locked. Crime was not something you worried about in a modestly prosperous Midwest settlement of no more than 2,000 people. The visitor was able to slip inside silently and close the door behind him. Still carrying the axe, the stranger walked past one room in which 2 girls lay sleeping and slipped up the narrow wooden stairs that led to 2 other bedrooms. He ignored one in which 4 more children were sleeping. He crept into the room in which 43-year-old Joe Moore lay next to his wife Sarah, raising the axe high above his head so high it gouged the ceiling. The man brought the flat of the blade down onto Joe. Then he struck Sarah before she had time to wake or register his presence. Leaving the couple, the killer went next door and used the axe on the other residents in the room. Once again, there is no evidence that they woke before they died, nor did the assailant or any of the other people in the home make sufficient noise to disturb Catherine's 2 friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, as they slept downstairs. The killer then descended the stairs and took the lives of the Stillinger girls. What happened next marked the Villisca killings as truly peculiar and still sends shivers down the spine a century after the fact. The Axeman went back upstairs and beheaded everyone in the home, leaving the faces of all 6 members of the family unrecognizable. The Moores were not discovered until several hours later. When neighbors didn't see the family wake in the morning, they called for Villisca's marshal, Hank Horton. That set in train a sequence of events that destroyed what little hope there may have been of gathering useful evidence from the crime scene. When a shaken doctor emerged, he cautioned members of the growing crowd outside, "Don't go in there, boys, you'll regret it until the last day of your life." Many ignored the advice, as many as 100 curious neighbors and townspeople tramped as they flew through the house scattering fingerprints. It is probably due to this damage to the crime scene, along with the lack of knowledge on such large crimes, that the killer was never found. It could have been one of the noisy neighbors or someone passing through time, but no one will ever know. What we do know is that there have been sightings of the family's spirits since, and the house continues to be a main attraction for dark tourism. And finally, in at number 1 we have House of Danger in New York. New York's Greenwich Village has some of the most desirable real estate in the world, except for this house on West 10th Street, known as the House of Danger. The townhouse is said to be haunted by the ghosts of 22 people who lived or died within its walls, including the tragic story of a girl who was killed by her adopted father. Being New York City, however, the house has a celebrity pedigree too. Said that author Mark Twain stayed in the house back in 1900 and returned for the occasional visit. The house seems to have started earning its reputation changing gradually after the Borman family stopped living there. The first recorded incident of bad luck happened in 1897. Cycling celebrity Fred Andrew, the new owner and occupier of 14 West 10th Street, had a moment of bad luck. During his residency, as described in the New York Times, of August 9, 1897, Andrew had a moment of reckless bicycle riding that caused him to hit a person. The person suffered a broken leg and Andrew was subsequently arrested. Jan Bryant Bartle and her daughter took up residency of a spacious apartment on the top floor in 1957. Bartle reported almost immediately that a monstrous moving shadow would often follow her around the home. One time she writes that she had seen a ghostly figure of a man standing in a hall. Bravely, she reached out and tried to touch whatever she was seeing. She felt something, but nothing like she had felt before. She described it as a substance without substance, chilly and damp. Bartle was a true believer and took the proactive step of employing a paranormal expert to investigate what could be causing these terrifying realities for the scared residents. The investigator confirmed what the couple had believed from the start. The investigator said that they were upward of 22 spirits at the House of Danger. Besides Mark Twain, he mentioned additionally a woman in a white dress, a young girl, and a grey cat. On November 2nd, 1987, New York City witnessed a genuine tragedy at the House of Danger. The passing of Lisa Nussbaum was so horrific it caught everyone's attention. Around 6:40 a.m., 911 operators got a pressing phone call from children's author and editor Hedda Nussbaum. She said that her daughter Lisa wasn't breathing, so an ambulance was sent to Greenwich residence right away. When the paramedics arrived, they were greeted by a very disturbing scene. They found Lisa unresponsive on the kitchen floor and her brother Mitchell tied up in the home. Paramedics were regrettably unable to revive Lisa on their way to the hospital. Later, her autopsy revealed the cause of death was repeated blunt force trauma. Hedda and Joel were both arrested and subsequently charged with first-degree murder. Currently in private ownership, the building is resided in today and continues to add stories of hauntings to the legends of paranormal activity in the House of Death. The stairwell continues to be the nexus of the ghostly activity in the building. The dark and wide antique stairs are where many of the ghosts still make their appearances.
Number 5 in this list is LA's Black Dahlia Murder House. Yep, just another murder house on the list of homes that you can buy. Top 10 Real Estate Deal says, tales of terror and tragedy rarely last as long as one of the most notorious Hollywood mysteries of the last century, the Black Dahlia murders. Rumors still abound about the home's previous owner, Los Angeles doctor George Hodel, and his involvement in the brutal killing, mutilation, and dismemberment of Elizabeth Short. Elizabeth was sliced in half at her waist and all the blood drained from her body. It looked like the work of a skilled surgeon. The house, an unusual piece of architecture crafted by Lloyd Wright, looks like it is cut straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. While a $2 million renovation has brought the house back to its original splendor, one can still feel that they should be running for their life through the house while being chased by Dr. Hodel. The house was recently on the market at $4.7 million and has been the backdrop for multiple Hollywood movies, TV shows such as Ghost Hunters and Paranormal America, and even an American Express commercial. Sliced in half, guys. Like, not just cut a little bit, literally sliced in half. You woke up as one person and now you are two pieces of that one person. Yeah, that's an absolute no from me. This was a horrible killing and one that has left its dark mark on the home and made it very haunted. I don't care how much you try to renovate this place or anything like that, nothing will ever be able to get out the spirit that lingers. Elizabeth will not leave, and frankly, if I was sliced in half, I'd be pretty pissed about the whole ordeal as well. She takes her anger out on those that come here. The people that live here talk about her quite frequently. And maybe the craziest part about this is that that's a selling point. This home is going for almost $5 million even though someone was literally sliced in half and their ghost now runs rampant through the home. $5 million is a lot of money, and spending all of it to get harassed by a ghost torso? Yeah, doesn't seem like the best investment. Number 4 on this list is the Gardette Le Pretre Haunted Mansion. Mansions are cool. I would love to own one. The second you throw the word haunted in front of the word mansion, though, I am no longer interested. Top 10 Real Estate Deals says the Gardette Le Pretre Mansion, or more locally referred to as the Sultan's House, has been photographed and heralded in articles from the time it was built in the 1830s. Having hosted the cream of New Orleans society from the beginning of its rich history, the home comes with a scary story. One morning, as neighbors were walking by the Sultan House, they saw blood trickling from under the front door. The police were notified and had to break into the house only to find that all inhabitants had been murdered with swords or axes, and the Sultan was found brutalized and buried alive in the backyard. It was always felt that the murders were executed by his brother, the real Sultan, as retribution for the theft of his fortune and many of his wives. How much is local lore and how much is true, we will never know for sure. This is, after all, New Orleans. Only a block from Bourbon Street, the French Quarter-style home with 9 bedrooms and 10 baths most recently was on the market at $2.65 million. We are talking about a place that has had multiple murders go down. Like literally a full-on massacre happened here and people want to spend over $2 million on it? How do we know that there isn't more dead bodies hidden somewhere in the house? Like under the floorboards or deeper in the backyard? This home is deeply haunted and I want no part of it. Number 3 on this list is the Wyckoff Villa. The haunting for the Wyckoff Villa is kind of up in the air right now as to if it's even haunted in the first place. I'll tell you guys the history of this and then let you guys be the judge. Rocket Homes says the Cape Vincent, New York home was built as a summer estate for William Wyckoff of Remington typewriter fame. Unfortunately, Wyckoff died of a heart attack the first night he spent in the home. The villa then went to his son, who sold it to General Electric after the family lost its fortune during the Great Depression. However, the company abandoned the home during World War II and it has sat vacant ever since, more than 70 years. A ghost of its former self, the once ornate home has been stripped of its doors, windows, stained glass, and marble features. But even as a shell of a mansion, the Wyckoff Villa is stunning. Its new owner, whoever that may be, will need to commit to a true labor of love, as this home will require a complete rebuild. The property shows promise, though, as it includes close to 7 acres of land and 3 waterfronts. So this home has definitely seen its fair share of stuff over the years. We got depression, war, a bunch of stuff that could easily have left a spirit behind. Not to mention the place was abandoned for decades and who knows what sinister things happened during that period of time. Because it was abandoned for so long, there aren't too many paranormal stories, but locals still think something is off about this place. If you want to find out for yourself, well, you're free to buy the place. Number 2 on this list is the Yulee home. So many of these places are haunted by their original owners, and this one is no different. Rocket Homes says, built in 1890, the Yulee home still has many of its original features, including its Yulee bricks. The brickwork original owner Stefan Yulee was known for around Silver City, New Mexico, where the home is located. Stefan and his wife Susanna were pioneers and 2 of the first settlers in the area, which served as a tent city during the mining boom. It's believed that Stefan and Susanna still haunt the property today. The Victorian home requires some renovation work but has a number of great features, including a balcony, basement, and 1-bedroom apartment attached by a breezeway. So if you buy this house, you get to experience the ghosts of 2 pioneers. Just absolutely swell. It's said that these 2 spirits will often cause tons of problems at the home in an attempt to get rid of you from it. So even though you may buy this home and it's good to go, within a few months you'll have renovated it tons of times over because these spirits keep messing it up. Just on a pure investment stance alone, it doesn't seem like the best idea to buy this one. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Lake Forest Schwepp Mansion. A Lake Forest mansion. This place is just made to be the setting for a horror movie. Rocket Homes says, built in 1917 in Lake Forest, Illinois, the mansion was a wedding gift from John Shedd to his daughter Laura and his new son-in-law Charles Schwepp. The stunning property had 27 rooms, ornate chandeliers, and carved wooden paneling. It was so exquisite that the Schwepps entertained royalty on more than one occasion while living in the home. Unfortunately, Laura passed away in 1937, and 4 years later, Charles committed suicide in the home and left an ominous note that read, "I've been awake all night, it's terrible." After his death, the home sat vacant for 46 years until Donna Denton and her then husband purchased it. They were the only people to own the Lake Forest Schwepp Mansion and once joked that the home was big enough to share with any spirits who lived there. Good thing, because the mansion was said to be haunted by Charles, Laura, and several servants who lived in the home. Jeez, well, now I'm gonna be up all night as well, Charles, because your spirit isn't gonna let me fall asleep. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this show before, but there's a comedy show out there right now called Ghosts. I haven't watched it personally, but just based on the commercials, these are the vibes that I get. Now, from my understanding, the ghosts in the show are supposed to be fun and silly, and these ones in real life aren't that way inclined. But maybe whoever owns this house should just play that sitcom on repeat and hope that the real life ghosts get the idea. I don't know, it's worth a shot. Number 5 on this list is the Los Feliz Murder House. This house is definitely not the one that you'd want to be purchasing, folks. We are dealing with a full-on murder house with this one. Rocket Homes says, on December 6, 1959, cardiologist Harold Perelson murdered his wife with a hammer, then killed himself in their beautiful Spanish Revival home in Los Feliz, California. After the infamous murder-suicide, the home was sold but never lived in. In fact, the interior wasn't cleaned out for years following the incident, preserving that night in time and adding to the home's creepy aesthetic. Trespassers in the past have reported finding old magazines and books, canned food, and cleaning supplies. Rumor has it that there was even unwrapped presents sitting under a Christmas tree left standing in one of the rooms. Today, the house is stripped completely to its studs, a perfect starting point for anybody looking to remodel the home's 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and 3rd floor ballroom. However, while the Los Feliz murder house is for sale, it may be difficult to purchase. The seller wants cash or hard money offers and may offer seller financing. So for just the low price of a ton of cash money, you can purchase a completely stripped down murder house. Yeah, I don't think so, guys. Even the seller is weird here, wanting cash for the home. Like, everything about this house just screams creepy and haunted and not the place that I'd want to live in. Number 4 on this list is the Dakota. The Dakota is witness to one of the most heinous crimes of our time. Rocket Homes says, New Yorkers may recognize this historic Central Park apartment building's iconic mix of architectural style, while Beatles fans recognize it because of its history. Not only was it the residence of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, it was also the place where Lennon was fatally shot by Mark David Chapman in 1980. Throughout the building's existence, residents and staff have claimed to see the ghosts of a little girl, a crying lady, and Lennon himself. However, supposed hauntings and an alleged curse won't keep buyers away from the luxurious 9-room apartment for sale inside the building. The residence features 12-foot ceilings, original moldings, and city views from floor to ceiling windows. You may even have a famous neighbor. Past residents include Laurel Bacall, Judy Garland, and Bono. Yoko Ono still lives in the Dakota today. But even if you love the apartment and can afford the $10 million price tag, there's one thing that may keep you from moving in: the co-op board. Upon receiving your application and background check results, this group of people chooses whether you can live in the Dakota or not, and they are apparently scarier than any spirit haunting the building. The board has a history of being choosy and has rejected such celebrities as Madonna, Alex Rodriguez, Cher, and Billy Joel. Yeah, so even though you can buy this home, if you are super rich, there's also the board factoring into this, and apparently they're pretty picky. Like, if Madonna can't seem to get an invite, then I highly doubt they're going to be opening the doors for me anytime soon. Either way, $10 million is a hefty price tag for a place as haunted as this one. I'd much rather travel the world with $10 million than get haunted by the ghost of a little girl or John Lennon himself. Number 3 on this list is the Boulder House. Ever wanted to get abducted by aliens? Well, now you can. Top 10 Real Estate Deals says, during the construction of their new home next to a mysterious pile of ancient rocks in Arizona, a young couple from Washington discovered that they weren't the first people to live in the boulders. Pottery shards and rock carvings were dated by experts back as far as 1,000 years. Then they found something even more astonishing: a Stonehenge-type phenomenon that occurs on both the spring and fall equinoxes. A 6-inch wide beam of light that starts in the glass between 2 boulders and slowly works its way across the floor and up the wall to a 36-inch spiral petroglyph. When the sun hits its mark, the stone projections light up like diamonds. What does it mean? Some people think it's a signal to space creatures, a light that will guide their spaceships to the Arizona desert. Or maybe it doesn't mean anything, just a freak of nature. Whatever it might be, it started over 1,000 years ago when the Boulder people first began living here, about the same time that the hard-shelled life forms first showed up on Earth. A dream home for archaeologists, historians, artists, or mystery lovers, the Boulder House on 9 acres with 4,380 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a great room with a massive fireplace was recently for sale at $4.2 million. It is now off the market. So for the low price of $4.2 million, you can call some aliens over and hope that they come for dinner. Then after dessert, get jetted up to their ship where they will proceed to perform experiments on you. Yeah, that's a big no thank you from me. The home sounds cool as hell, just minus the literal extraterrestrial visitors. Number 2 on this list is the Linwood Hall. Linwood Hall is maybe the biggest haunted house in the world. Top 10 Real Estate Deals says proof that wealth does not bring happiness is shown by the tragedies experienced by the A.B. Widener family who built the 110-room Linwood Hall in Pennsylvania. Said to be the largest remaining example of neoclassical revival architecture from the Gilded Age, its decline began with links to the sinking of the Titanic. When Widener invested with JP Morgan in the White Star Line, little did he know that his son and grandson would die on the maiden voyage of its flagship, Titanic. Consumed with guilt and grief, A.B. Widener died in his grand mansion 3 years after the sinking. It is said that the 3 Widener ghosts are still its caretakers, and its legacy continues to be the world's biggest abandoned ghost house. Linwood Hall was listed at $20 million in 2014 and dropped to $16.5 million in 2015. It still hasn't sold. I mean, if these ghosts were actually going to be caretakers, that'd be pretty cool. From what I've heard though, they don't always just leave it at that. These ghosts, as with many paranormal entities, like to cause problems. For close to 20 mil, I want my home problem free. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Amityville Horror House. Now you guys probably know this home because it often makes all the lists associated with Ed and Lorraine Warren, but did you know that you could actually buy it? Well, in all honesty, you can't purchase it anymore because it's off the market, but a few years ago you could have. Top 10 Real Estate Deals says the New York home where Ronald Defoe got up in the middle of the night in 1974 and brutally murdered his parents and 4 siblings with a rifle while they slept. The home was occupied just a year later by the Lutz family until they were forced to leave because of the rampant paranormal activity. The storied horror house on the Ocean Avenue waterfront is today an extensively remodeled home. The 5,000 square foot home most recently sold in 2017 for just $605,000. This is one of the most haunted homes in the history of the planet, folks, and someone bought it. I'm surprised that it's even still standing, to be honest, and somebody hasn't completely demolished it since all the haunting reports came out. I don't even want to go into the same area as this home, let alone buy it and live in it. But if that's something that floats your boat, then apparently you could have.